Number 6. Enemy at the Gates, starring Jude Law, Ed Harris, and Rachel Weisz. Based on a true story, Enemy at the Gates is about a Red Army soldier in World War II who gets caught up in an ongoing duel with a German sniper during the Battle of Stalingrad in 1942. This is another one of those movies that had a great story concept but was just poorly written. There were two reasons why I didn't like this movie. The first reason is the lack of historical accuracy. Starting off with the obvious, the actors speak English. Even when it shows the Germans, they're speaking English. And none of them even try to have a Russian or German accent. It's a free-for-all. Another sign of lazy directing. Now, I really emphasize the word based when comparing this movie to actual events, because almost everything in this movie is made up. It is true that Jude Law's character Vasily Zaitsev was an actual Red Army sniper who did have a 3-day battle with a German sniper in Stalingrad. Yeah, that's the real Zaitsev. Jude Law looks just like him, doesn't he? And yeah, Khrushchev did arrive in Stalingrad to help command the Russian defenses, but besides all that, everything is fictional. There was no Soviet newspaper journalist, no romantic love interest, no Ron Perlman sniper, and actually no Major Erwin Koenig. This movie goes into depth about the sniper Zaitsev is battling. He's this ruthless crackshot who comes to Stalingrad to take out the Russian snipers. He eventually learns everything about Zaitsev from some Russian kid, and Zaitsev is just a regular soldier who eventually gets recognized for his marksmanship. When the duel begins, it seems like it goes on for weeks and the two snipers travel all over Stalingrad fighting, while the Soviet newspaper and the German army rave about it. In reality, Vasily Zaitsev was more of a sniper trainer than a soldier. He left the Russian Navy and volunteered to go to Stalingrad to become head of the sniper school. During the battle, he got caught up in a duel with a German sniper that lasted 3 days. Eventually, Zaitsev got the sniper, and when he found the body, it was just a regular enemy. No legendary ruthless Ed Harris sniper, just a regular soldier. I guess the real story compared to the movie is quite uneventful, but it's war. It's not an adventure. It's not about romance and fame. It's about what needs to be done even though it's horrible. Also, at the very end we get this closer that says Vasily Zaitsev's rifle can still be seen to this day in the Stalingrad Museum. Which, yeah, that's also true. But if this closer is being loyal enough to point that out about the real Zaitsev, then why the hell is 85% of this movie about people and events that didn't even exist? Alright. The second reason why I didn't like this movie was because it just seems out of control and all over the place. The opening scene when Zaitsev is being used as cannon fodder by taking part in a massive charge into the Red Square, it just didn't do it for me. I didn't think they needed to show this to us. It wasn't a good introduction to a movie about snipers. It seemed like they wanted to do the Saving Private Ryan effect where it opens with an actual battle that took place, but somehow it just fell flat. I also didn't like the Danilov character who was controlling the Soviet newspaper back in Russia. He's supposed to be like a propaganda expert, but all he seems to write about is how much he loves Zaitsev. It would have actually been much better if they showed him making up stories and propaganda about Zaitsev and the snipers. And why the hell do we have to have a stupid love story? Rachel Weisz plays this sniper girl who becomes part of Zaitsev's team. You just knew from the first scene with them that they were going to end up in the sack together. And there is a sex scene with them, but like everything else in the movie, it just seemed unnecessary, not to mention awkward as hell. I understood what they tried to do with this scene, showing that sex isn't natural when you're on the battlefield, but it's probably common knowledge to know that, so why do we need to see it? Just get on with the damn sniper duel. I also didn't like how they kept jumping back and forth to the Russians and the Germans. I think the story would have been more suspenseful if we never even see the German sniper. It would have all been from Zaitsev's point of view. It would have been much better if all it was Zaitsev having this 3-day non-stop battle with a German sniper who we never see. Forget about the big introduction with Stalingrad and forget about all the characters that we don't even care about. Just focus on the snipers. Just like Steven Spielberg's movie Duel, where an average man gets into a car battle with some unknown truck driver in the middle of nowhere. It's more suspenseful and actually more realistic. Speaking of realism, let me ask you this. Why is every shot in this movie a headshot? Unless the head was the only thing visible, snipers were trained to aim for the center of the body. And some shots in this movie are just ridiculous. Check out this part when Ron Perlman gets killed. He jumps over this gap in the floor and Ed Harris nails him right in the head while he's in midair. There is no way that would happen. Not only is the shot impossible, the sniper wouldn't be dumb enough to even attempt it. I don't know, just for some unexplained reason, as video games have shown us, we love headshots.
Headshot.
Yes, they're fun in video games, but in movies, it's not very realistic for every kill to result in a headshot. Number 5. The Dirty Dozen from 1967. Starring Lee Marvin, Charles Bronson, and a whole bunch of other stars at the time. Jim Brown? What the hell? Some of you might be surprised that this one makes it on my list because so many people consider this movie to be an all-American classic. Well, this list is my own personal opinion, and I consider this movie to be a typical 60s pro-war all-American arrogance turkey of a film. Just like Force 10 from Navarone, it praises war and makes it look like fun. It's about an OSS major who's assigned to a top-secret mission, there's a cliche for you, to take a platoon of convicted felons and knock out a castle in France full of Wehrmacht officers in order to confuse the German high command from responding to the Allied invasion of Normandy on D-Day. You know, when you hear it that way, it seems like a pointless mission that wouldn't really do anything. I mean, do you really think your little assault on a castle will make all the Germans forget about the 200,000 soldiers invading your territory? I don't think so. After Lee Marvin recruits all the felons, he starts training them, which results in some stupid humor sequences and playful bantering. Like the scene when Donald Sutherland pretends to be a general. Please. That was one thing that I just couldn't get past. These stupid scenes that were all supposed to make us laugh and root for the felons. You know, just like real war criminals. I thought this was supposed to be a war movie, not a goofy Saturday morning serial. And it's too bad because I kind of like the idea of forming a platoon full of criminal soldiers and forcing them to do your dirty work. But this movie paints them out to be the good guys and the commanding officers to be the bad guys. I think the movie would have been more interesting if we didn't like the criminals at all. It's kind of what makes a bad guy more interesting than the good guy. And when I say interesting, I don't mean likable. Anyway, the army eventually wants to shut down the mission, but the Dirty Dozen platoon turns into rebels and tricks the army during war games. They're so impressed with their strategy that they just gotta let them go. I think the proper response would be, how the hell did this platoon full of mindless criminals come up with such an impressive strategic plan and execute it so perfectly? Anyway, the final part of the movie has the biggest 60s war cliches that were around. Disguising as the enemy, which allows you to go anywhere in the castle, shooting your gun at your hip and striking a cool pose while the guy's death is extremely unrealistic, all the Germans being portrayed as dumb fools, and all the German uniforms lacking an extreme amount of detail. Also, it's pretty unrealistic that every American uses an M3 machine gun. These guns actually weren't used all that much. Only a small number of soldiers had them. They should all be carrying M1 Garand or M1 carbine rifles. Their mission was to wipe out this castle full of German officers, but it looks like it also has an equally amount of German civilians. And guess what? They lock them up in the basement and kill them along with the officers. In a way, this is the only part of the movie that shows us that war is a bad thing. But at the same time, it's praising the criminals who are doing this whole thing. So I guess we also want those civilians to die in cold blood. Anyway, everyone dies at the end except Lee Marvin and Charles Bronson and the MP. Basically the main characters. By the way, I like the scene when Jim Brown gets killed. Thought it was funny that everyone just looks devastated when he gets shot. But why? Why was he such a big deal? Nobody else seemed to care about any other deaths in the film, just his. Anyway, it's stupid, it's unbelievable, it's unrealistic, whatever. It sucks. Number 4. Pearl Harbor. Yikes. This is a 2001 typical chick flick love story that stars Ben Affleck, Josh Hartnett, and Kate Beckinsale, along with a bunch of other stars. Let me just start off by telling you that this movie's budget was $200 million, making it the most expensive movie ever made at the time. Yeah, it passed Waterworld's budget, and just like Waterworld, it was a huge, overhyped flop. What a waste. Michael Bay, you suck at movies. I swear, every single movie that this guy makes has been horrible. All he cares about is blowing stuff up in his world of CGI. I think South Park put it best.
Those aren't ideas, those are special effects! I don't understand the difference. I know you don't. Get him out of here!
Yes, you can imagine that the attack on Pearl Harbor in this movie is just recycled material from any Michael Bay film. The battle sequence is so unbelievable it's funny. Like when Affleck and Hartnett play chicken with the Japanese fighters, you've gotta be kidding me. As for the story goes, it's a ripoff of Titanic. Think about it, it's the same exact scenario. An extremely long, overhyped movie about a typical love story that just happens to be at a historical place or event that ends up in disaster, which becomes the title of the movie. I mean, there is no difference. And I really didn't like Titanic all that much, so I really did not like Pearl Harbor. While having this long, drawn-out love story, they throw in a whole bunch of other characters that we don't care about and aren't significant, like Cuba Gooding Jr. The movie briefly cuts to him a few times while he's like on his boat boxing. Okay, why? Then during the attack scene, we see that he shoots down an airplane. So is that why we cut to him earlier in the movie? Just to show that his purpose will be to shoot down an airplane that won't do anything for the story? He is so useless. So is this long build-up for the attack on Pearl Harbor. I know I've used the word long a lot in this review, but that's because everything in this movie is long. It's one of the longest movies I have ever seen, if not the longest. It's somewhere around 5 hours. Anyway, while the love story is going on, we keep cutting to the Japanese getting ready for the attack, and the Americans wondering when the attack is going to happen. They even concentrate on historical figures like Minoru Gende, who planned the attack, and President Roosevelt, played by John Voight. You've gotta love the stupidity of that scene when he stands up. And I can't believe they got Dan Aykroyd to play the guy who's figuring it all out. The cutscenes to the Japanese and the Americans are huge distractions and don't serve any purpose. I guess they knew the movie needed a distraction when the love story is about some stupid moron who gets a nurse to fall for him, then he dies in the Battle of Britain, then she falls in love with his other friend, and then it turns out he's not dead. In movies, when it comes to the war hero supposedly dying, how come they're never informed that he actually didn't die and that he's on his way home? Anyway, with all the characters, they're either stupid or completely pointless. Ben Affleck was an idiot, Kate Beckinsale was a cliched nurse, Alec Baldwin was just plain Alec Baldwin, Josh Hartnett was the most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my life.
I think World War II just started!
You think World War II just started? Don't you mean, I think a war between the United States and Japan just started? Because the war in Europe had already been going on for a few years, and during the time of the war and even after it all ended, they didn't call it World War II! But the movie is just full of stupid lines and scenes like that. Especially this one when Alec Baldwin, who's playing Jimmy Doolittle, addresses his pilots before the raid. Okay.
Take a look at the man beside you. It's a good bet that in the next 6 weeks, you or he will be dead. Everyone brave enough to accept this, step forward.
You know, the military did not, and still to this day, don't do stupid stuff like that. It's just something the movies made up. It also fills the dialogue with the cheesiest lines like,
Please, don't take my wings. There's only one more thing I can tell you. Leave your goddamn hula shirts at home.
and
Are all Yanks as anxious as you to get themselves killed, pilot officer?
Not anxious to die, sir. Just anxious to matter.
I thought by the time this movie came out, we were past those cheesy war movie lines. Guess not. So basically, this movie tries to have a love story, but at the same time tries to teach us something about history. The only thing I thought it taught us was that Michael Bay still hasn't gotten over his love for CGI special effects. What a load of crap. Number 3. Windtalkers. Starring Nicolas Cage and Christian Slater, this movie tries to tell the story of the Navajo code talkers in the Pacific during World War II. They used communication methods based on the Navajo language that the Japanese codebreakers couldn't understand. But it fails beyond belief to correctly tell the story as many people already know. Now, how could this horrible movie not make it on this list? Some people consider this movie to be the worst war film ever made. I agree that it sucks a big fat one, but there are two more movies that I thought were worse. So, Wind Talkers, make